Okay, so to start us off, the first panel really is about talking about the mission of the campaign, right? So we have some questions prepared for our panelists to kind of answer, to help explain the campaign to everyone. So we're going to start off with Lee. So Lee, what is the core mission of the Vote for All campaign, and why is it important for expanding voting rights?
For sure. Hi everybody, good morning. Thanks for having me here today. Basically what we're trying to do, if I could put it all in one sentence, what we're trying to do with the campaign is that we're trying to engage our neighbors here from New Brunswick. It's an initiative that we want the community to get involved with, specifically because it's about expanding the right to vote, right? We're trying to talk to all the neighbors here in New Brunswick to motivate them to be able to vote this coming November, to be able to expand local voting, municipal voting for people who are undocumented and for people who are starting from 16 years old all the way, whenever they, for them to vote every time, right? Even if they were documented or not, regardless of immigration status, it is a way to bring in a community that has long been in the shadows, specifically talking about their ability to have their voices heard here in the community. These are people who, we've come from different countries, who have given up so much here in the United States, who make up the community itself. We have family members who are in school, in our school systems. We pay taxes here. We contribute to the local economy. And it's only fair for people to also be represented the same way.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Okay, so next I have a question for Suraj. What are the key barriers that prevent certain groups in New Brunswick from exercising their right to vote?
I think, unfortunately, it's the demonization of immigrants in our society coming from our political leadership. I mean, we've seen a troubling shift to the right, even from local Democrats who opportunistically use anti-immigrant rhetoric in their politics. And now we have the election of Donald Trump, who was running on an open platform of mass deportation. And many of these local politicians refuse to declare cities as sanctuary cities. Many of these local politicians will turn a blind eye towards massive amounts of spending on detention centers like at Delaney Hall, instead of meeting the basic needs of the working class communities within their cities. So I think this political situation discourages immigrants who have legal status from participating within the political process altogether, let alone non-citizens who may be afraid of losing their green card status, and undocumented immigrants who may be fearful of deportation. And that creates a situation in which the working class people in our communities are suppressed politically and provides an outsized influence to the New Jersey's business class and New Jersey's landlords.
Thank you, Conrad. Jasmine, can you explain how voter suppression impacts local communities, particularly marginalized groups?
Okay, I think we can all agree that marginalized groups, especially non-Spanish speakers, are hit the hardest. There's strict voter ID laws. We know that a lot of non-citizens can't get IDs, which limits their ability to drive a car. There's fewer polling places. Neighborhoods are underrepresented in ward politics. There's no way for our local government to effectively spend money in ways that are actually going to benefit locals.
Thank you.
Oh, I wanted to just say one more thing.
Go ahead. No, please go ahead.
No, I just, I took notes because I forget things. People lose confidence in the system. And I think that just bringing voters together and letting them know that they have a voice and they have people advocating will help people gain trust and further democracy, of course.
Okay. What are the main goals of the Votes for All campaign, and how do we plan to achieve them?
The main goal for the Votes for All campaign is to bring more voices to the table. Like we basically, as far as some DSA members going to city council meetings, getting direct opposition from the city, and it seems like the way that we can go forward, which Vote 16 has done in Newark, is I think a referendum.
No, they actually, Vote 16, they were able to push it through the city council. Vote 16 is an NGO, and they basically have the ability to kind of like push it through the city council, I guess. And that's kind of what makes us unique, right?
Right. Yeah, so.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about like what it's been like in these city council meetings like we've been going to together? I know you mentioned there's some opposition from the city council. Like what does that look like, and you know, what are the concerns of community members in New Brunswick right now around voting?
Oh, that's a tough answer. It's a tough answer. A lot of people in this city are receptive to the idea of undocumented citizens, undocumented neighbors, having a voice on a ward, city, and county level. People are more open to that idea. The objections are, you know, a lot of people feel like you have to be a citizen or you should be a citizen, but I don't know if the same people understand the obstacles that come along with that. So, you know, we're just going to city council meetings and just, I mean, we have been getting hit with resistance from people who will not be named.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I think like, you know, Jasmine and I have been going to these meetings together, right? Listening to people talk, right, about their experiences. And I think like you were saying, like there is resistance, but we talk through those conversations, right? Like that's what's so powerful about this campaign, right? Is like we're talking across our differences, right? Like one things like we always say, right, is like we might have different experiences of oppression, right, but our fates are linked, right? So that's what this campaign is about.
Getting involved on a local level, attending these meetings, a lot of them are online. They can be found on the City of New Brunswick. The best thing most people can do is just go to these meetings. They don't post the budgets online. They print them out for people who come to the meeting, and just see how they're spending money. There's people who come on a regular basis, and our police chief refuses to come and address the citizens.
Yeah.
Most people don't even know about shootings in the area. We're just trying to get more people informed about what's going on in our own city.
We're trying to like have our local government actually take care of us, right? It's so interesting, like we put this conference together in 2.5 weeks, right? And we were able to get 4 interpreters, right? And the city council has no interpreters. Only the city council president, she interprets everybody, right? But she doesn't interpret the whole meeting. She only interprets the people that come to the public comment to speak. So anybody who speaks Spanish at these meetings, like, is not able to even fully participate in the meetings, right? And it's not as if we haven't asked for that, right? Like, yeah.
There should be bilingual materials. I mean, it's just as easy for them to print out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How hard can it be? We did it.
We did it, so.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Could I add one more thing?
Yeah, oh
Chris?
yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to add because you were talking about, Jasmine, about like what you've been able to encounter, like reaching out to people here in New Brunswick, and I think we have to recognize that to a certain extent, like that has been structurized, right? Like we know about the nativist movement in the 1920s that was like pretty much dividing people on like who deserves rights and who doesn't deserve rights. And from the 1920s till now, we are left with this narrative that like somehow undocumented people don't deserve it. Like they shouldn't have access to the ability to vote, and they don't deserve it. It's kind of like ingrained in people's minds. But historically, it's wrong, right? Well, looking back at previous like administrations, at one point there was around 33 states that allowed undocumented people to vote, both in local elections, state elections, and federal elections. So we have to bring back that information back to the community and let them know that to a certain extent there has been this narrative that has vilified not only the undocumented community, but just that come from other countries, but also the undocumented community that was already here. Centering people in the fact that like for like a really long time, like people have been like pushing this barrier of who can vote and who cannot vote, right? Taking it back to when women couldn't vote, right? How like that movement had to like push through everything to be able to get that win. When people were not represented as people, right? African Americans were not represented as equal people. There was a fight to push to be able to be recognized as even that, which is embarrassing, right? But it had to be done. And so when we are confronting this narrative that is almost expected, I think, of undocumented people don't deserve, we have to be able to like bring back the alternative, right? The actual conversation of like historically that's wrong, and we are in a position where not only we can create this change, we can bring undocumented people into the democracy, but we should, especially because right now we don't have the Senate, we don't have the House, we don't have the White House, and we don't have the Supreme Court. We have to make sure that the state level is very secured and that our communities are protected at the state level, at the county level, at the city level. And then even when you have all of that, which is something that we're learning from our campaign to close down detention centers, even when you have all of that, the federal government will still try to impose themselves onto us. So how do we make sure that like when we when we build a movement, we're making sure that like not only are we getting our wins, but how do we secure those wins here locally and fight off the feds?
Lee, you mentioned that there's, with regards to the Leaning Hall, right, that there's pushback from the federal government, right, to force this on our community. Can you explain a little bit, like, about why that's happening?
Sure. So obviously, like, also we have to look at the historical like narrative that they're trying to feed us, right? And that has been that somehow creating detention centers and locking people up and deporting them, they think that that's their system to fix people needing to come to the U.S. We know that that's just wasting money, basically, because year after year they increase the budgets for the detention centers, they increase the budgets for deportations to hire new ICE agents, and up to this day, we haven't seen that system actually work. And what we have seen is that people will continue to defy the borders because you gotta feed the family, you know. You have to. There's other necessities that like outweigh like putting your life at risk, which is another sad thing that we have. But like that's what we are. That's what we're organizing on. And so year after year, since 2003, when they founded the Immigration Customs Enforcement, their budget has just increased by millions and millions and millions. This year, they approved like $3.5 billion for them to hire 300 more like border agents and to work on detention expansion. And this wasn't Trump This was the Biden administration. We've been telling them to exit out, to abolish the detention and deportation machine. Why? Because we know that there is going to be a lunatic that's going to try to expand that. And now we have them. Now we have Trump coming in this next year. The deportation machine is like running and operating. All he has to do is command, copy, paste. Everywhere. In every state around the country, he's just going to do command, copy, paste, expand, you know? And although there's organizations that are saying, oh, we can ask Biden to leave the detention program or the detention idea, like, there's no evidence for it, and I think that it brings the ball back to us where we have to make sure that our state is secure and protected.
Like adding to that, and like really connecting that to this campaign, like thinking about how like Trump is, I like what you said about how Trump is using a system, right, that Democrats have already created, right, have sustained and supported throughout the Biden administration, right? And so, like this is they're just using what was already in place under the Democrats, right? But on a hopeful note, right? On a hopeful note, so we started organizing this campaign before the election, right? All the way back. Gosh, when did we originally start doing this?
I think it was around February we really started formulating what this campaign would look like.
Yeah, and you know, Saraj was the one who wrote the original proposal, right? Like, really put things together from kind of the beginning nation stages. So, could you talk a little bit about like why initially, like you and the rest of our comrades on the electoral working committee, like we're thinking about this and like how we created our own machine, right? Our own comrade people-powered machine that we have to meet this moment with Trump.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, I think at the end of the day, it's about political power, and I think that the demand for political democracy is the demand for power. It's why political machines in New Jersey, especially local political machines, reduce democracy down to a procedural joke. I mean, in this year's election in New Brunswick, there were 5 members of the city council up for election, and all 5 were unopposed, right? So I think we were entering into this demand because we saw the conditions within a lot of New Jersey's working class immigrant cities where immigrants are disenfranchised. Immigrants have demands that are not being met. For example, in New Brunswick, the local school was demolished to allow for an expansion of the Robert Wood Johnson Cancer Center, and instead children were expected to have to go to school all the way across town. So it's clear that our communities have demands that are not being met by their the local politicians because they have political machines, they have entrenched levers of power, and they are in service to landlords, to developers, to business interests. And in order to counteract that, we need counterpower. We need counter-organization. We need to build movements and even a party to oppose those things. So I think that was a lot of our thinking going into this campaign, is we want to put forward the demand, but we also want to build out the ability to win. We want to build the organization that can win at a political level and bring forward that demand for democracy. in a way that is independent, organized and intervening into the system, which is not a democracy. It's a joke.
It's been such a journey, right? Like doing this stuff from like the ground up, right? Like working together, we had to learn basically every aspect of the campaign, right? Like we learned a lot from working on Uncommitted, and it really has like projected us into this campaign. Okay, but now let's turn to talking a little bit about our partner organization, Cosecha, right? Cosecha is it's such a vital, right, co-partner with DSA. Like, is this like the first official like DSA Cosecha campaign, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it is. So, can you talk about like what role Cosecha has had in the campaign so far, and what Cosecha specifically would like to see like as in this campaign going forward?
Yeah, sure. Basically, so Cosecha has been organizing here in New Brunswick for a little bit. Some of our members were going to try to make it today, so hopefully y'all get to meet them. But I think one of the stories that I would like to share regarding something that was fought here in New Brunswick, and that were a lot of Cosecha moms really try to push, was this thing, this fucking sorry, my bad. This fight that was super overshadowed by the city council when they were closing down the Lincoln Annex. For the people who do not know, there's a school here, the Lincoln Annex, that most of their students were sons and daughters of immigrants. Some a big chunk of them from undocumented parents. And so Rutgers wanted to move that school so that they could build something else in place. But it was it wasn't planned very well. They were planning to move the students to a warehouse, basically. And that warehouse had a lot of toxic chemicals there. And it was a big talk in the town, in the community, because all these kids all of a sudden had to be taking classes in a warehouse. All while Rutgers is making all this money from our community, from being here in New Brunswick year after year after year. They go further and they insult the community that lives here, their kids, by putting them in a place that is unhealthy. That we know that toxic chemicals cause problems in the learning capabilities, and just a terrible environment for them. And so obviously it pissed them off. The parents were able to go out and organize amongst themselves as community members here in New Brunswick, and they sat down with the city council. They did everything they could, basically, so that this wouldn't happen, and yet the city council decided to go forward with it. We saw that obviously that the dynamics that people face when they go to a city council meeting is they look at you and they kind of suss you out, are you able to vote or not? And only if you're white and only if it looks like you're able to vote do they somewhat listen. And even then, people who are citizens will tell you here, the city council kind of just does their own thing. It sucks, but that's what we're trying to, that's the terrain that we're trying to organize in, right? Where everything just falls on deaf ears. And so with this new campaign that we're launching today with DSA, the hope is that we are bringing this one fifth of the community back into the local democracy. What do you call it? The local democracy, right?
We're creating the democracy.
Right, we're creating that space and further bettering what we have already. And it's annoying to just already start hearing some opposition to it. It's bro, are you serious? We are literally telling you this is what the community needs. This is what you gotta be doing. And it kind of just falls on deaf ears. So we're hoping that the collaboration between the community and the students and the teachers and the university in general is able to outweigh the strength of what the city council people are trying to gatekeep.
The reason, I just want to say, just piggybacking off of Lee's comments, the city council responds to Rutgers and Robert Wood Johnson the most because they have all of the money and all of the say. These kids are literally in a warehouse with no windows. I remember when that whole thing happened. We have to go to these meetings. We have to also remember that they have below ground meetings where they already approve things before the above ground where people are making comments. So knowing the agenda, which is always posted on the City of New Brunswick website, going there prepared to answer or to ask questions about each resolution, and community organizing, and going there and literally bombarding them with questions. And about the fact that these people do run unopposed, these are not the most moral people. We've got people under indictment, having to pay settlements. And it's really important that we get local activists to run and more voices to drown out Rutgers and Robert Wood Johnson because they are buying this entire city. And that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
So I know you are doing a documentary on Paul Robeson, right?
Yeah.
And when I was canvassing over the summer, right, like I knocked on hundreds and hundreds of doors. And I had a list, right, of people to knock on their doors. And one of the things that struck me, right, what's so interesting, one of the interesting things about this campaign, right, is that it requires citizens, right, to vote for non-citizens to vote. Interesting, like complicated dynamic, right? And let me tell you, like those conversations were powerful. But one of the things that I noticed, right, walking around the city collecting, hundreds, I think I personally collected like 150 of the 215 we needed. And one of the things I noticed was like a huge portion of the people who signed without hesitation, right, without like tons of questions, without giving me tons of skeptical looks, was actually Black people. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how, what some of the voting struggles of the Black community in New Brunswick have been, right? Like what the historic Black community in New Brunswick, what their experience, right, has been with New Brunswick city government, right? And how votes for all, right, because it strengthens the working class, could benefit that community as well.
Okay, so you did a great job, by the way, gathering signatures and basically following the bureaucracy that you have to in order to make these things happen. I can't really speak for a lot of the residents. The ones who do have hesitations don't have hesitation when it comes to local ward politics. I think that most people can agree, citizens can agree that all people who live in this area pay taxes, especially on like food and or other items, deserve a say. So there is a citizen, a local activist, who comes to pretty much every single city council meeting, questions almost all of the resolutions, and she is talked down to, unfortunately, by members of the community. Her arm is literally broken right now by the New Brunswick police for trying to Narcan someone. And there's very few people of color in these meetings. And I think our city council depends on people not showing up. But they are very, very disrespectful to people of color and not very accommodating at all to non-English speakers.
Yeah, exactly. And like this campaign is about like realizing like that the structures behind these two issues, right? The issues are different, but the structures behind them, white supremacy, right, are the same.
Yeah.
right? Okay, so I want to ask Suraj a question real quick. Can you talk about why it's important to involve union workers in overall?
Sure. You know, I think I think at the end of the day, you know, democracy is a labor issue as well. You know, there's a lot of racist myths and racist rhetoric around immigrants, a lot of which is completely contradictory. There's the racist myth that, you know, immigrants, you know, are here to get benefits from the government, and then there's the other racist myth that immigrants are stealing jobs. You know, we know the truth is that undocumented people make up a very large amount of New Jersey's economy and perform work with very little protections and very low pay. Ultimately, the immigration regime that exists in the United States exists to serve the bosses, to serve business interests, going back to farm labor, going back to day labor in construction, going back to many types of factory work. I mean, these are the types of jobs that are undocumented neighbors work in very exploitative conditions. And it's why it's very important to organize as workers. And some unions have taken the lead on this. United Electrical, Radio, and Machine Workers in New Jersey have protected immigrants, undocumented immigrants who have spoken up about labor law violations. There is deferred action for labor law violations, although it's very difficult to get. You know, unions and community immigrant organizations like Cosecha have managed to, you know, secure these kinds of victories for workers through organizing and through organizing on the job. And so that aspect of this work is very important because the role of immigrants in the economy is a very large piece of why this legal system exists in the first place, and we need to change the fundamental balance of power that favors the bosses and have it empower the workers instead.
Okay, turning to Lee, right? So, like I said, when I was talking to a lot of people, most people were excited about it in New Brunswick. I think there's a pretty overwhelming excitement, interest about enfranchising all these groups of people, right? But I was hoping that you could speak to the skeptic, right? Like, what would you say to somebody who is a little skeptical, maybe thinks that, like, citizenship is important, and voting is something that should be connected to that. What would you say, in as few words as possible, but powerful words? I know you can do it. What would you say to convince them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it goes back to even like representation without, what is it? No taxation without representation. Thank you so much. I learned that in second grade, y'all. I just come from Mexico, so give me a break. Yeah, so I think it even goes back to that, right? If you want to see it in a very like American conservative, like eagle flag type vibe, like even then, like history supports struggles like this because they had like the whole thing with the Tea Party, like where they were getting their independence from the British. they refuse to like pay taxes without that representation, right? This is kind of something similar in the sense that like right now there's a lot of people who are paying taxes who are undocumented and who are like even like some of the younger people for 16, 17 who have a job, like they're paying some local taxes here too. And so it brings back the question is like, you're taking my money, we're contributing to the government. Where is the government contributing to us? How are they giving voice to our concerns? How are we be able to influence the democracy? So even like that, like if you're talking to somebody who is like, oh, die-hard America, it's like, bro, you got to support this because, hello, representation, taxation without representation. Another thing is that we are not alone. There's so many other cities around the country who already implementing something like this. There's somewhere around like, 17 cities? DC, San Francisco, Oakland, Maryland. In Maryland, there's multiple. In Vermont, there's multiple. Here in New Jersey, we have Newark, who is already allowing youth to be able to do local elections. And so when we see other people who are interested, it's just like a genuine like check mark. It's like, oh, this sounds like a good idea. I know there's people here from the campaign in Jersey City. That looks pretty good, right? We'll need to talk later, but it looks good so far. And I think here in New Brunswick, one of the biggest things that we're gonna face, I think, is, at least in this first phase of the campaign, is that like common narrative that, oh, the undocumented person shouldn't be allowed to vote. Which once again, if we look back at the history, like that's wrong. And I want people to feel confident in that when we talk about like who deserves and who doesn't, because if we allow something to divide our community into who deserves rights and who doesn't, we already lost. This campaign is about telling the community and reassuring the community like, hey, you're here with us, we're gonna be here with you too, and we're gonna try to get like equity for like the whole community. And if this is a step for it, like we're gonna do this, take this first step, understanding that like it is a first step and that we're gonna continue to push moving forward. But yeah, we're not alone. The history backs us up, and even if you have to appease to the conservatives, you're like, hey, this makes sense because of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I would point out to them, like, you know, sometimes one of the things people would mention to me is like crime rates. And one of the things I like to point out to them is that immigrants actually have a lower crime rate than citizens do.
Yeah. And could I add one more thing? And not only that, but like the people who study, like how do you bring that, what is it, like crime avert, I don't know how they word it weird, but like how to bring down crimes,
yeah.
Like you have to address the root problem, right?
Yeah.
You don't create a bigger jail, you are able to address like what that person needs, what the community needs, something that has been proven. So instead of us creating like another detention center or to create like this division in our community, we have to say, bro, literally if you fund the community's like things that like are actually holding it down in times of need, then that's the way to go.
Absolutely, I absolutely agree. Another thing I would always say is, you know, I'm like, well, my family are immigrants, right? Like, this land don't belong to my people, right? They don't, it doesn't, right? Like we're guests, right? This is unceded territory, and unceded Monopoly land, right, that we're on right now. And so, you know, and it's very interesting, like the origin of democracy in the United States doesn't come from the Greeks, okay? It comes from the Haudenosaunee Nation in what we call now upstate New York, right? The longest democracy in the world. And, you know, that's the democracy that we're fighting for, right? It's a democracy. You know, the Haudenosaunee, they allowed anybody to join the Haudenosaunee Nation. They did not have the borders that like the United States has, right? So we're looking for true democracy, right? Like not something warped by settler colonialism. Okay, but on that note, Jasmine, you and I are New Brunswick residents, right? Like,
This is the community that we live in, that we go to school in, that we work in. That's where we met each other at the Rutgers encampment for Palestine. And, that was a powerful moment for both of us, I think, that experience, and very unifying. And I think together in our friendship, we've really I've had the amazing privilege of getting to know you and imagining New Brunswick as seeing New Brunswick for all the absolute beauty that is already in it, and its beautiful, rich history, but also what it could be, right? You and I talk about this all the time, what we want from New Brunswick, right? Healthcare, housing, right? Human rights. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things that you would like to see, right? Lee was talking about, right? What are some of the things that you would like to see the New Brunswick government do, right, to actually help and create a beautiful future for the city of New Brunswick?
I love this city. I was born in the city. My grandmother was born in this city 100 years ago, next year. And what I would like to see going forward, obviously, electoral map in this area will change. Your vote is your voice. I would like to see an honest local government. I'd like to see a larger presence. I'd like to see more community organizing.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think also too, one of the things we talked a lot about is the houseless community in New Brunswick, right? And how we would and the opioid epidemic in New Brunswick is quite serious, right? So what kinds of things would you like to see our city government do to address those things?
I would like to see our city government provide more affordable housing. Right now, the way affordable housing goes is there's a couple organizations in the state that control all of the affordable housing units, which is why waiting lists are so long. There's one narcotic vending machine that with clean sharps and stuff next to the Unity Center, 81 Remsen Avenue, which is also the site of the only warming center in New Brunswick when the temperature drops below 32 degrees. So of course I'd like to see more resources, more places like the library open up when it gets cold, because the Unity Center has a very limited capacity, more soup kitchens, ordinances lifted so that the Elijah's Promise soup van can travel park. I've heard insane excuses from the city council as to why, the Meals on Wheels truck can't be, will be violating city ordinances.
It's crazy. It's absolutely, it's antisocial the way that the New Brunswick City Council talks about the houseless community, right? The homeless community in New Brunswick. Their excuse, the one that they give us over and over again, is well, if we provide services to the homeless people who are here, then they'll all come to New Brunswick, right? And we don't want to be responsible for them. And it comes from what Lee was talking about, right? That some people are just not seen as deserving of our community, right? Of our resources, right? But the homeless community is a gift, right? Those are beautiful, wonderful people, and frankly, of all the places they could be, I'm glad they're here because, I want us to create a community, right, where we are welcoming. I want us to truly be a sanctuary city for everyone, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's funny you said that. I was actually told that I can't volunteer for Code Blue by the person who coordinates that because that person didn't want me around those types of homeless people. Homelessness is a condition. Poverty is being demonized as if a condition can't be improved. And We just have to put our foot on the necks of people in the city. People who call themselves community affairs. Keith Jones II can contact his office. He's our community affairs director for the city of New Brunswick. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Jasmine.
Okay, so this is the last question for this panel. It's going to go to Suraj. You're the beginning of the campaign, so you can end the panel. What's the next step for the Votes for All campaign, and how can people stay involved moving forward?
Well, you'll see on your tables that there's some QR codes that lead to our website. You can sign up as a volunteer on our website, and there's also a QR code to donate if you want to donate some money to help us win this campaign.
Just make sure you're a citizen, unfortunately. Campaign finance law is based student. This paper has the donation link as well as the website, which has a sign-up form for the campaign. So if you want to help us organize with this campaign, you can sign up there.
Yes, absolutely. And we have petitioning happening in Jersey City. I believe there's a big canvas coming up next week. I think on the 23rd. Don't quote me on that, but it's on our calendar on our website. Also, we're planning to repetition soon in New Brunswick, potentially with a slate of ballot measures to address some of these other issues that we've seen brought forward today. So definitely more to come on that. And I think in this time, in this political climate, I think it's more important than ever that we organize and that we build organizations that belong to us, that speak to our interests, that we can participate in and feel a home in. So I highly encourage you to join community organizations like Cosecha and New Labor, or join DSA, or join some of the many other groups that are putting in the work to truly build working class power, and to truly, move this movement forward.
Cosecha NJ is the Venmo for Cosecha. Please actually also, it's very important to support this campaign. Hell yeah, please do. But also, Cosecha just opened up a beautiful, wonderful community office space in Elizabeth. And it's important that we support that. It's such a beautiful, wonderful space, a beautiful vision that Cosecha has. And they've just been amazing partners. So, please make sure that you donate to them as well, so that they can keep doing their work in Elizabeth. We're bringing Votes for All to Elizabeth, definitely soon, right? So yeah, please support them as well. And do you want one more thing? Okay, yeah, please go ahead.
We definitely appreciate the shout out. The center is open for the community. We are currently teaching English classes. We help people apply for the driver's licenses, which until 2018 that wasn't a possibility here in the state. But we're able to do that. And if you want to collaborate, always reach out to us. We're down for the community. The other thing I wanted to say was that in order for you to get involved, feel empowered, because this is going to be our campaign, right? Especially amongst the people who have this type of mentality of broadening democracy, being able to work with people who are coming in from other countries. I definitely invite y'all to do it, and to always keep our other campaign in mind as well. It's really sad because around the world, Christmas time comes and you think about good vibes, you think about family, you think about presents, but in Newark this year, the last week of December, we will be getting a private prison that holds 1,200 immigrants. O sea, a prison that targets immigrants. Like, that is their main objective, right? They bring them into our communities. We're going to see a lot of ICE agents. We're going to see raids, unfortunately. And to make it even worse, Carissa, they're planning to open this detention center in a zone that's not supposed to have people, that's not supposed to have animals, that's not supposed to even have like plants or whatever. It's a very like super industrialized zone, and they're gonna stick undocumented people in there, people from our community. So stay engaged in that campaign as well. Don't shy out. We're definitely gonna need the community support to be able to fight the federal government at this point.
And go ahead, Devin.
I just want to say about the federal government, what we are about to face with Donald Trump is the most right-wing, extremist, anti-immigrant, anti-people of color attacks. And just basically, I didn't know that, Lee, about the prisons. We are hearing about even people who are here under temporary protected status are being targeted. So, we have to be really vigilant, use our voice locally because it's going to affect statewide and possibly federal. Because all the federal judges that are appointed by the president have lifelong tenure. So depending on who's the White House really shapes generations going forward. But be vigilant about this protecting each other, undocumented siblings.
I just want to say one more thing about like what's coming up with Trump, right? Constitution is a document written by people. It can be changed by people, right? Governments exist to serve the people, and when they cease to serve the people, that's when the people have to take back control, right? And that's what Votes for All is all about, is about the people, right? The people in our communities, in Jersey City, in New Brunswick, taking back our governments.
Hi, I'm Jason. Sometimes I go by JR. First, I just want to thank the DSA and Cosecha and New Labor for putting this together and inviting me to participate. I'm going to talk about what the border is and how socialists should engage with it. Borders are often understood as lines of demarcation between nation states where one country's sovereignty ends and another begins. But that's not entirely true. To really understand the border, we should think of it less like a line on a map and more like a zone or a membrane that people pass through that sorts them into different categories. The border is an area that transforms the people passing through it. And even after you pass through it, it sort of sticks to you, it's stamped onto you. It doesn't change your appearance or your chemical makeup or anything like that. It's a political and social transformation. You enter on one side and emerge from the other as a citizen or a tourist or a guest worker or an illegal alien or asylum seeker. The border, it manufactures social divisions. And in that capacity, it's a weapon against the working class. A person designated as undocumented or guest worker has less rights than the rest of us. They're forced to work longer hours and worse jobs for less pay. They cannot organize into a union or demand better working conditions because the boss can always pick up the phone and have them deported. And their fellow workers, the ones with citizenship, are inundated with xenophobic ideology, and they feel threatened by immigrant workers, which undermines solidarity between the two. Undocumented workers live precariously, and employers leverage this precarity to increase profits in multiple ways, including paying undocumented workers less, making them work more under worse conditions, dividing the working class against itself, undermining solidarity, and reducing the ability to organize, and lowering the wage floor for all workers in the country, regardless of their legal status. All types of capitalists profit from the exploitation of immigrants and the militarization of the border. Construction contractors build walls, fences, and surveillance towers. Other companies manufacture and sell guns, radios, vehicles, computers to border control and to ICE. The tech industry develops and sells surveillance technology like motion sensors, cameras, drones that are all deployed at the border. Private prisons, they're contracted to warehouse people in detention camps. And financial institutions invest in all of these things and profit off of it. Taken together, we could call this a border industrial complex. It's not a separate phenomenon from the classic military industrial complex. It's just a different expression of it. In fact, the infrastructure, technology, and strategies developed by this border industrial complex are often utilized to serve U.S. imperialism. The U.S. exports training, surveillance tech, weapons, all sorts of things to client states around the world, especially governments in Central and South America. All of this package of surveillance, imprisonment, and violence that's exported abroad, it inevitably ends up back here in the United States. And not just at the border of the United States, but everywhere. It's integrated into federal, state, and local law enforcement who use it to suppress the domestic working class. Everything developed for and tested at the border is eventually used against people like student protesters, organized labor, animal rights and environmental activists, Muslim communities, and way more. In the end, the border threatens workers all around the world, including United States citizens. And I want to emphasize here that the Democratic Party is deeply complicit in this. As the Republican Party becomes more extreme, the Democrats follow them rightward, trying to prove that they're just as tough on the border as the Republicans. The Democrats, they're the party of the status quo, the party of things as they already are. And millions of people, I think we saw very recently, millions of people are searching for a party that represents things as they could be. That represents justice and human rights and real democracy. And I think that party is being created in the DSA. And an important piece of that process is fighting to defend and expand democratic rights. We, as socialists, need to say to all working people, especially in immigrant communities, that we're with you, we will listen to you, we will amplify your voice, and we will fight for your rights alongside you against any political party that's trying to curtail or eliminate them. Both parties, Democrats and Republicans, want you to believe that the border is a national security issue, but it's not. It's a labor issue and a democracy issue. They want to sum up our position in the phrase open borders. But open borders is just a phrase. It's a soundbite that they use. It's not a strategy or a policy position. And I think we should reject that framing and instead counter it with a political program that includes freedom of movement, amnesty and democratic participation for all, demilitarization of the border, and conforming with international law. And I think we're really lucky to have some great organizers here in New Jersey and at this conference who got to do this hard work with the Vote for All campaign.
So yeah, I have a little speech there, so bear with me, and then it'll be Q&A. But so my research interests and expertise is mostly talking about how different communities of color organize together, which I think is foundational to any successful movement in this country, especially given the rampant right wing that's growing, and frankly, even some of the forces within the Democratic Party who promise a lot and do not just a little, do almost nothing sometimes to protect people they claim to represent, right? So if you'll bear with me, I'll just like to share a few words trying to connect those things and give maybe some insights to what to think about. But first, I also would like to thank the organizers of this conference for making this happen, especially in a time of increasing fear and right-wing attack. Truth be told, we live in the most authoritarian country in modern history, a country that sings the praises of democracy while welcoming the latest grand wizard into the White House. A country in which unelected judges decide what rights we're born to have. So having this conference is very essential, right, as we build our knowledge together when we see these problems looming over the horizon. We can certainly win during these times, but our ability to win state power and smashing the right wing depends on building coalitions among the oppressed, many of whom are people of color. As people of color, we share common enemies, common political horizons. In his autobiography, Malcolm X stated, "Book after book showed me how the white man had brought upon the world's black, brown, red, and yellow peoples every variety of the sufferings of exploitation." Assata Shakur, black radical, who was interestingly enough arrested by white state troopers, a town over in East Brunswick actually, in the early 1970s, also believed in this. In fact, in her memoir, which I encourage everyone to read, there's a point where a black comrade comes to her and says, "Why are you going to the West Coast to meet Asian American radicals? They don't care about us." And she responded to him saying, "There were a whole lot of us in the same predicament, and that the only way we were going to get out of it was to come together and break the chains." So for generations, black and other non-white thinkers have identified the need and reasons for why our people must come together, both as a defensive measure against the encroaching colonialism and repression, but also as a path forward to create something new, an actual political system that benefits most of our people. Today, the vast majority of African Americans, Asians, Latinos in this country, even those of us who've made it, however briefly, into the middle class, are living paycheck to paycheck and are also sometimes one job away from losing it all, whatever that is. Still, there was a time when our communities were doing more than just survival. During Malcolm X's and Assata's era, that of the 1960s and 70s, you had groups like the Black Panther Party forging connections with the Puerto Rican-led Young Lords. You had countries like Algeria providing refuge, in fact, for Black Panther Party members who were seeking refuge from the repression. Around the same time when Shakur escaped to Cuba, Cuba, in fact, had sent its own troops, thousands of troops, to southern Africa. At that time, the apartheid South African government, supported by us, was encouraging the apartheid government, much like Israel today, to go ahead and invade the surrounding area. And it was actually Cuban troops in solidarity who prevented that, along with the Angolans and the other forces on the ground. We can, as much as things have changed, return to that. With the genocide in Gaza continuing, erasing entire family trees in seconds, to ICE disappearing fathers, mothers, husbands, wives, we have no other choice but to get back to that place where you have the power of the government, of the state, at our disposal, to wield against our enemies, to create space for our friends. Again, as someone whose research is based on studying the potentialities and developing coalitions between our people, there are some things worth sharing to grow our base. So, as mentioned already, most people of color are worried over issues related to their economic well-being. I've personally heard this throughout my time organizing, reporting, and doing research in places like Jersey City more recently. Whether someone is an Indian American collecting shopping carts outside a store, or African American plugging in data for a nonprofit, or someone who's Honduran American also working a office shirt job, but during the nighttime driving Uber, all of these people are forced to care about the rising rents, the rising cost of living, especially in the Garden State. Any movement or organization that fails to address these issues, regardless of its other objectives, will cave and flounder. If people of color are expected to also be part of these movements, they honestly lack the time, the resources, and sometimes the training to do so. If you want people to challenge the oppressive dynamics they're in, we need funds for when people choose to strike. We need funds to help pay people when they refuse to pay their rent. We need funds to aid people in helping pay for basic items so that individual doesn't have to look for another job and doesn't have to hustle after their first job so they can actually spend more time here. Because honestly, it's not only about people choosing not to do something, they're forced to keep working, they're forced to make an extra buck. And so if we actually have the resources to not force them to do that, they'll spend more time in these spaces helping all of us working together. Relatedly, another insight I've gathered is the fact that crisis moments like this one do not inevitably lead to people becoming radicalized. That is something that can happen if the right groups are involved, but usually people grow desperate. And people of color, I was going to be honest, white people kind of take the cake in being politically incoherent and leading the way on that. But a lot of people of color, out of desperation, could also fall into that trap too. right? So even from personal experience, I've heard people who may not be as antagonistic towards these kind of campaigns, but they might not want to be bothered. Some people may have just gotten their citizenship and feel like they're out of that fight. And in other instances, you might find black and brown folks pitted against each other because they're thinking that the pie is growing smaller, so why be concerned about a bigger thing? I'm just going to be concerned about myself. That is something that will happen and has been proven to happen even 2 Tuesdays ago, right? So that is very fundamentally a big thing I want to raise. And even if you look at some data, for example, in Pew Research in 2020, following the great protests that happened, there were African Americans, rightly so, saying they want reform in law enforcement or the legal apparatus. But in those same reports, a lot of African Americans also wanted funding for the police, or even more funding for the police, right? In a lot of parts of this country, like New York City, a lot of Asian Americans are supporting sometimes law and order politicians, right? And you can find the same things with Latinos as well. Like in Texas, Ted Cruz, who is, I believe, the Zodiac Killer, his base is not just white folks. It obviously is a lot of them because they are part of this project of settler colonialism. But it was also a lot of Asians and Latinos. And this will be a recurring issue again and again if we ourselves don't confront that. All right, and this last part here is before suggesting what else to do about it, I also want to say there will be people of color, I think a lot of us know about it in this room, because of certain interests who won't stand with us. And the goal of a movement is not to always win everybody over. They are brown landlords, right? They are brown and black ICE agents, security officials. We just had a brown woman who was running and who had said, "I'll build a wall too." Like, she mocked Trump, not because she was against the wall necessarily. She mocked Trump because he didn't build the wall. So there's that also issue, right? So this is something we really have to think about. We're entering a phase in which the right wing, and if you can call the Democratic Party left, I would argue right wing as well in a different version, they will recruit people. And they can find some people who are willing, because of their own interests, to be recruited. And as leftists, as socialists, as people striving for something better, we have to be in those spaces knowing that, challenging that, and bringing people to our side with empathy, but also challenging those who might mislead them, right? Ultimately, to effectively confront such challenges, movements must be bold in their appeal. This is the final point. A movement that desires to organizing the working people of color of this country cannot be limited to only one issue at a time. The rights of undocumented people must be fought at the state and national level, along with the police being defanged and defunded, labor unions being organized in every part of our economy, and the genocide in Gaza being ended. In fact, that's a huge reason why Kamala Harris lost. I mean, the reality is that is a very bread and butter issue too. If you have family here, as I've also learned from a lot of friends, and you lose family there, I don't know how else to explain anything that hits home closer, right? So fundamentally, there's a lot of Arab and Muslim brothers and sisters and comrades out there who would be very happy to be part of this movement if we offer that to them, along with these other issues. Any movements that fall short and are not holistic in their demands and strategy, and also maybe become too hyperlocal, will not be able to build the necessary power and momentum that we need. Finally, we can win. I truly believe that, but we can only win when we pay attention to reality as is, but with the goal of changing that and shaping it over time for that longer-term goal of true liberation for all of us. And I want to quote the late, great Glenn Ford, founder and editor of the Black Agenda Report. "The people must convene, learn the truth, and make their verdicts." So let us convene, let us know the truth together, confront it, and make our verdicts together.
So now they're designating New Jersey as a swing state, which was pretty interesting, considering the amount of young people here, the amount of people of color here, substantial amount of people who historically have been a part of the Democratic Party. So I'm just sort of like interested to the question. My question is, Kamala lost by almost 5. Well, she won New Jersey by 5 percentage points, which is relatively low. It seems like there's a lack of electoral engagement, right? So I'm just curious as to what would be the strategy around engagement around some of these core bread and butter socialist issues, and how you can start making the demands on the electoral structure here, considering that there's no line that exists currently.
I think what Sudeep mentioned, I think in his remarks, was very powerful about Palestine. Just to be vulnerable, in this election was the first time I ever voted third party. And the reason why I voted third party was because of Palestine. For me, as a person who is queer and trans, of course I was terrified. I have an older brother who is, after the results of the election, is convinced to move to Canada. It's had very serious. My whole family is dependent on the bureaucracy of the federal government for survival with disability. And so it's going to have very serious implications for my own family. But, I worked on Uncommitted, and what I learned in that movement that really moved me to do what I did was realizing that, my brothers and sisters and siblings in Palestine are also dying right now. So the implications on a personal level are very real. But at the same time, I was being asked an impossible choice, right? My brothers, sisters, and siblings in Palestine, right? They are being slaughtered by both of these parties. They don't care, I think the border crisis too, like Lee was pointing out earlier, right? The system already existed and was set up ready to go as soon as someone took power, right? The Democrats in the New Brunswick City Council have, they have said to me that they don't think that our citizens deserve, our non-citizens deserve the right to participate in municipal elections that are not school board meetings. They think that should only be reserved for citizens, right? Both Democrats and Republicans are upholding systems of white supremacy, right? And violence that are affecting our communities all over the world, right? During World War II, this was a topic of conversation among socialists even back then, right? Are we supposed to go back and support our imperial countries, right, the working class, or are we going to unite together? And they didn't, and then we had World War II, and we're about to look at World War III, right? That's what we're facing, that's what we're looking at. Sorry, I really took on this question, I'm taking over too much time. And I think we're in that same moment. That's the moment we're in, is we're looking at World War III. And the question is, what are we going to do differently?
First of all, New Jersey was kind of trending in different ways, because January 6th, that day, a lot of people who did that were actually from Jersey, so it's not totally alien to this region. I think during the 80s, Ronald Wilson Reagan, 666, he won Jersey, I think, twice, or maybe at least one of those years. So it's not totally unknown, right? We know that in this region, in this state, we also
Governor?
What do you say? Yeah, Chris, I was going to point out the Police Benevolence Association, the state troopers. The state troopers, like I said, arrested Assad Shakur in East Brunswick. There's a lot of that always floating in our midst. As someone who grew up originally from here, well, I'm from Queens originally, but grew up here, 9/11, that unleashed a whole world of chaos for many people, many of whom are going through that second wave now. So I just wanted to put that out there, these trends have existed in a way in the state. But yeah, I also voted third party, at least on the national level. So I'm sure there's also a lot of votes missing from this count. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of folks who didn't turn out to vote again. Mm-hmm. 2020 was pretty different. 2020 saw an uptick of turnout, actually. It still did not match the other countries that are considered our peers, but there was an uptick. Now there's a downtick again. Donald Trump did win more of the popular vote this time, which is scary, but he did not match necessarily his exact level in 2020 either. Kamala Harris lost a ton of voters, some of whom probably would have voted for Biden, so there's a bit of that racism and sexism that's there, for real. But there's also the fact that a lot of young people, because of the genocide, didn't show up, and a lot of young people were not engaged. The Democratic Party and the Republicans don't reach out to voters a lot sometimes. I think 2020 was a little different, but they don't do a lot of outreach until it's a little bit too late. And just really quickly, how do we engage? Well, we have to do these kind of campaigns beyond the electoral realm. Because we have to re-engage with a different kind of thinking that has to do with building a constituency of people that wants things to improve and that won't necessarily improve or wait to improve every 2 to 4 years. So I think it's a deeper question of how do we get these campaigns to build up a force of people who could choose to vote what they want to, but they vote as a block. But ultimately, they also know that their story still goes whether or not the midterms are there or whether or not the Electoral College decides who's president next. So
I agree with everything already said, but I just wanted to add that the best way to get people engaged in the democratic process is to make it more democratic and to also offer them something different. This election we had Donald Trump and the Republicans saying the country's falling apart and it's because of XYZ groups, it's all their fault. And then you had the Democrats countering saying, actually, everything's fine. Everything's all good. And also we're going to build the wall better. So people look at that and they don't see that much of a difference, I don't think. I think that's why participation in the elections are pretty low. Like, Donald Trump, I think, got about the same amount of votes as he did last time. So it's not like there's a big swing towards everybody, well, we're all voting for Donald Trump now. I think a lot of people just didn't vote or voted third party for a lot of legitimate reasons. And yeah, I think we just have to offer something different. We have to be able to say, not that everything's fine, but things aren't fine. And it is because the rent is too high. It's because healthcare is too expensive, or you can't even get healthcare. It's because the minimum wage is too low. There's not enough jobs, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, I think that's the only way forward. You have to offer something different.
Thank you. Yeah, and just to add on that very quickly, during Uncommitted and Votes for All, I probably registered at least, maybe minimum 50 people. So I would like an award from Governor Murphy. First of all, just kidding, I'm joking. But we're actually, interestingly, registering a lot of people to vote with our campaigns, right? We're probably doing more voter turnout than Democrats are, in New Jersey for sure, right? And that's because we're doing issues that people care about, right? But yeah, great question. Okay.
There's a ban on fusion voting on a state level, right? But there's not a ban on third parties locally. So what I was trying to say, and I'm trying to paraphrase it, is that if we want to see the changes that we all hoped for in this federal election, we can do so on a municipal, local level. Yeah.
I am Cuban American, and I'm a part of a Cuba Solidarity Working Group. Marco Rubio is most likely going to be Secretary of State under a new Trump administration, and I'm a bit scared that we might finally see a military intervention in Cuba happening, and we might get a Batista 2.0 dictatorship. I guess my question is, assuming the worst case scenario happens, or we have sanctions to the point where it'll be back where we started basically, how can we as socialists organize to keep fighting for ending the embargo/blockade on Cuba? And assuming a military intervention does happen, and a new Batista dictatorship happens, how can we as socialists, I guess, finally educate, for example, my family, who I came from an anti-communist family, actually, and maybe finally see the error in their ways?
All
I think the best way to organize against some sort of intervention against Cuba is the same way I think we should organize against any war. We need to be firmly anti-war. We need to
block the weapons.
Yeah, not just what during the Iraq War there were enormous protests and they did it anyway.
Yeah.
I think, well, first I think we gotta give some credit to the Cuban people. I don't think it would go as well for the U.S. as they initially assumed. Just like things haven't gone super well for Israel, like they thought they would just walk right in. So I think we have to be adaptable. I imagine this country would become very jingoistic at the start of the war, and as things go poorly, that would fade, and we have to be there to say, we're against this, both parties are for it. This is useless murder and death, and we're the ones who want to stop it.
Thanks for the question, Richard. I do want to just refer to that and also remind people that also Haiti is probably also more likely to be reinvaded. Haiti, actually, there is an attempt by the U.S. to recruit Kenyan forces to invade. And if you guys don't know, we obviously invaded and occupied Afghanistan. That was our longest time invading a country, occupying a nation. But it was actually, I think 16 years we were there. Before Afghanistan, it was Haiti that the United States occupied for almost 15 years. And that was during Woodrow Wilson's era, the so-called progressive, the man who was the president of Princeton. He's a terrible, terrible human being. But just relaying the fact that Haiti is very likely to see that happen again. And also to say a few things. What works usually is, of course, protests, but like you mentioned, blocking arms shipments work. One thing we could do is reconnect with the port workers before this happens, so they understand the role that they're in, because there are instances where workers don't quite get it, not for the fault of their own, but just there's a lot of things going on. But it'd be one thing to reacquaint ourselves with workers in those distinct positions, port working, because that's where the transfer of arms happens. So we can reconnect with them and build that camaraderie with them and help them understand how this will not just destroy Cuba, but Haiti. And of course, we could find workers in those areas who are, like you, Cuban American, Haitian American, who don't want to be part of that. But this also raises the point, I just want to say this, there's a lot of things to be scared of, but to be honest, we're not alone in our fight. We're only alone if we only think domestically. But the world is actually on our side. The Palestinian people are on our side.
Period.
The fact is that they've survived seeing their kids being killed, and they are still fighting. I mean, it's a very hard thing to think, but the reason why Israel is dropping 2-ton bombs is because they are not successful in invading on the ground. And that has a lot to do with that fighting force. So they're doing that. The Cuban government and people are doing what they're doing. They have survived a 50, 60-year embargo. The Haitian people have survived so many different kinds of attacks.
Yep.
And they're still fighting back. I mean, they're fighting through administration after administration of humiliation. And yet they still manage to keep this beacon alive. Like, the fact of the matter is South America would not have freedom without Haiti.
Period.
The Louisiana Purchase. The Louisiana Purchase, I mean, that's a debacle for the native folks, but that would not have been possible if Napoleon wasn't into debt because the Haitians freed themselves. So this country has been managed to, they've basically been punished for being free and black. And the Cuban people are being punished for also being free. But we can actually stop the arms shipments and connect with those workers we can. And also remember, we're not alone in this effort. The world is against what the U.S. does through its companies and different apparatuses. Israel is only succeeding because it's receiving arms from us. But if it was left to stand on its own 2 feet, it would have been replaced already with an actual free and democratic Palestine. So I just want to give us a sense of hope. We're not alone in this if we think internationally.
And I think just one more thing. I think we should close Delaney Hall, like in Newark, right? Because like that's essentially like, you know, our things are connected, right? If we can get Delaney Hall closed, we can block weapons, right, to anywhere, right? You know what I mean? Like we should be learning from Cosecha, like how do we do this, right? Like get Lee up here to answer this question. How do we stop it, right? We're gonna learn from each other because together we can do it.
I want to connect to Richard's statement, but I'd like to connect to Richard's question by adding a commentary from my own experience as someone with a member of my family in the military. And I'd like to say that there is a longer-term strategy open to us for combating American imperialism as progressives. And this is that American imperialism, however high-tech it becomes, still needs bodies on the ground to commit its atrocities. And how does it get those bodies? Two ways: student debt and toxic masculinity. We combat these things, we take those bodies away. I also wondered if I could ask a separate question of Sudeep, and this is that as a biracial person, I often wonder about the differences between whiteness as an American invention of oppression and white people who are on our side when they're working class. And how can we talk about the solidarity of black and brown people in ways that don't alienate maybe less reconstructed white people who are working class and need to be reached out to by us?
Some of it I don't know, to be honest. I'm just being honest. I think some of it's going to be trial and error, right? Because there are instances where when we work with white folks, some of them will get it immediately, and sometimes things crop up later where you get sort of caught off guard. And I think number one is just to try, regardless, right? Like I think part of what I was saying too was also with not the same exact sort of pushback, but with a lot of communities of color, we just need to try, right? We need to try to intervene and be in those spaces before we even try to conclude on anything, right? And all of that's going to be trial and error. I mean, we're living in a world of a lot of unknowns. I think I mentioned in the speech that the world of Asada and a lot of the other radicals is a very different world too, right? That world included governments that were not the best always, but still openly able to send arms and support to radical movements like the USSR did. That's gone, right? Like Russia is not that country. It's very weak, it can't do it. And as much as there's anti-China, oh, sorry.
Can you slow down a little bit? It's going too fast.
Sorry.
Passion.
As much as there's a lot of anti-China politics here, China itself is actually not that combative to the US. So we're kind of missing that on the international stage. And domestically, we're missing those groups like the Black Panther Party who did organize with working class whites in Chicago. So a part of that is we're in the unknown and it's going to require trial and error. And then secondarily, I think some of it is just, I mean, people move with their wallet in a way. So if people engage and provide people things like rent money, even with the most annoying person, and I've met many annoying people organizing who are like, I'm just like, why did you think that? I've been speaking to you for weeks, and then they double back to an engagement in politics that's like, oh my God, you're like my family. But when you talk to them, they'll remember that this group did this thing for me, right? And I think that's the strategy we need. Some of it's very moral, but a lot of it is strategic and very basic. Oh, that group, they held a cookout, and at the cookout, I got lots of food. So even though I don't like everything about them, I'm not going to speak out against them. So it's also that issue of neutralizing people who could turn to the other side. But frankly, there are going to be white people, and other people too, to be honest, like I've said, who are not going to be on our side. And we have to be ready for that. But there's a ton of people who will be and can be. Like I live in an apartment building where it's a lot of older brown folks. They talk to me, random stuff, they like me for some reason. But I like to talk to old people, I guess. But
Me too.
but a lot of them have no idea what the DSA is. But I can tell that if I did talk to them eventually about these groups, they'd maybe be open because they know me and they understand, at least the way I would argue, that DSA means you might actually get something back from the government or get a resource. But honestly, I think a lot of it will be trial and error. But I'm very glad that you asked that question. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and when I was canvassing for Votes for All, like, you know, there were a lot of old people that we talked to, and you know, Democrats will tell you, don't even bother engaging with older voters. They're not going to support your stuff, right? But I did not find that to be true at all. Just like Sudeep is saying, right? Like, people are, you know, willing to listen if you're willing to talk to them, if you're willing to walk up to their door and talk to them.
My question is about how to imagine a better world for everyone. And, you know, all of us and our families have really dark and bloody histories. No matter where you come from in the world, you and your family have probably encountered war, have probably encountered poverty, and imprisonment, and we know that these things don't necessarily lead to, you know, radicalization, as Sudeep mentioned. And so I'm curious about how we, with these histories, with these fears, with the threat of you know, incarceration and difficult punishment for trying to build a better future, how do we build something that that we can imagine outside of what we've experienced in the past? And yeah, how to step outside of fear, and who to look to as well, because in many ways, you know, even the most liberated movements can fall into the trap of hierarchy. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it got me thinking, you know, well, two things. First, I was going to say, U.S., how do we think of creating a better world? You know, I think no matter who you are, or where you come from, or what you've been through, most people want and need similar things. You know, at their core, you know, good health, safety, a good place to live, food, control of their time, and meaningful community. And those are all things that are at the core of socialism and at the core of DSA and other movements and organizations like it. So I think getting people involved in this sort of politics offers people that hope. It is an opportunity to show people that there's another way to exist, another world we can live in, and that we can do it together. And then about these sorts of organizations falling into hierarchy, I'm of the opinion that it's not necessarily, that there's something inherent in the hierarchy, in, you know, abstractly speaking, in hierarchy that's bad, but who is that hierarchy accountable? Like, if you're in an organization, can you recall the representatives, you know, the leaders of your organization? Can you hold them accountable democratically? Maybe there's a hierarchy where this person leads this project and this person leads that project, and that's fine. Sometimes structurally you have to organize things that way to get things done, but are they accountable to the majority of the membership? And does everybody have a say? Does everybody have a voice? And are there mechanisms in place to hold the leadership accountable to the democratic will of the organization?
So I'd like to get my thoughts down. But so I think what you're talking about is like, how do we make sure people's traumas don't infect them and infect the work in a way, which is kind of bound to happen because we live in a society that is very unwell. People are going to be having meltdowns and not doing well, and also having burnout and having issues health-wise even. So first of all, people need to be aware of some like disability studies and theories around that, having those discussions with people, like what is even a normal body versus whatever it is. Like for me, for instance, I'm recognizing even for me, I have a lot of like health issues and physical issues that are coming from the trauma of capitalism and, you know, stress and all that stuff. So that's number one. Number two, I think there's some bare bones things that you can do, which is, you know, so first of all, like what I was saying about marginalization, not creating radicalization, it's because when you're left to interpret the world on your own, or with friends who may know as much as you can lose the plot, right? We see that with a lot of men. To the earlier question about toxic masculinity, right? There's a lot of men who might be actually hurting or facing some issue, but they're interpreting the world through Joe Rogan. So they might be like, oh, I didn't get this job I liked. And then Joe Rogan's there to say, well, it's a non-binary person. I did that.
You're welcome.
So that is an issue. But ultimately, the solution is, like, I think people are aspiring for a community. And that's what I think a group needs to do. And that's what groups have done in the past. Like the Black Panther Party did include a school. They included the breakfast program. They included a network of things. Like they would also shake down businesses for extra money. All right. But they would do that, but effectively. I mean, I think the party in New York City, I think, stole a healthcare machine that tests for sickle cell or something like that. So they did things that benefited people. But there's an ecosystem that we used to have. Like labor unions used to actually have a whole network of institutions you can go to have your wedding at, to have a baseball club at, or things of that nature. So we need to do that. While we also, I know you saw your face, but like a baseball club, but any other sport. I don't know why I mentioned baseball. She was made a face. I was like, okay. Married in baseball. Yeah, I like baseball. But suffice to say, the other thing that I've learned is in the 50s and 60s, the community control movement of mostly Puerto Ricans and African Americans, the organizers behind those groups to come together, because they didn't come together. They actually had deeply held stereotypes of each other. The thing that worked was to break that down, was to simply have them strategize together, right? To build something together. But I do want to add, I'm not here trying to romanticize that process. Again, there's going to be people who will take up space, who will push other people away, and at some point, those people themselves, sometimes you just have to recognize that there's more people than that person to care about. But at bare minimum, you need to create an ecosystem where people feel like they're being part of something bigger than themselves. And I think that really helps when you just do the small steps of even organizing in the same room, even if it doesn't go well. Like maybe they come out of that 40-minute conversation without a clear goal in mind, but at least the training of that is there. Because we live in a society where we're trained to do the opposite. We're trained to be very individualistic sometimes, or when we are cooperating, it's as consumers, or at the church or the mosque or the Hindu temple, or in other instances where it's not, frankly, as revolutionary as we need. So that's just something to think about.
Hi, I'm Virginia. I just moved to Jersey, state of Jersey, like 7 months ago from Florida. I'm from Venezuela, and one of my most, all my life I lived in Venezuela where we had democratic socialist government. Colleges were free, healthcare was free, and then this populist Chavez came in telling people that he was going to fix the country, and then he said he was a socialist. Now he left after he died a dictator. So college is not free anymore. Healthcare is not free. I have family members over there that need surgery. They have to buy even the silverware to eat. Spoons, forks, the gowns that they use for surgery, everything. Family who live here has to send them all that stuff for surgery. I was a surgeon over there, and everything was given by the government if you went to a public hospital. I went to public college. I don't pay 1 cent for medical school. Plus, everybody has to go to college now, have to pay. And they consider themselves socialists, they say, which I don't believe. They're just dictators. So I have family members, I have friends here from Venezuela that kept making fun of Kamala because she was communist or socialist, and they didn't vote, they voted for Trump. And I don't know how to explain to them that what's going on in Venezuela and some other Latin American country is not socialist, it's dictatorships. So if anybody can help me figure that out, how I can help these people understand that that is not socialism. So maybe for next elections, we can have more people voting for Democrat socialist probably?
Yeah. As what Virginia was saying regarding Venezuela, my stepmother is also from Venezuela, and she also fled from Chavez, but she still has family in Venezuela that are under the Maduro regime. I guess what I can tell you is, I guess, maybe just talk to them about what democratic socialism is and how is it different from Chavismo or even Madurismo. There are socialist organizations I think we should look into, like Maria Socialista, who was like anti-Maduro but pro-Chavez. There's also another PSL party, I think it's called Partido de Socialismo y Libertad. And funny enough, during this previous election for Maduro, even the Communist Party of Venezuela opposes Maduro, by the way, recently. PCV. Yeah, PCV, correct. I guess the best way to talk about it with your family members or even friends that didn't vote for Kamala or even third party, like Green Party, for example, maybe just talk to them about how we can have a coalition of anti-Maduro socialist organizations in Venezuela, I guess, and I'll try to see if maybe we can like even talk to DSA IC, aka International Committee, to talk about how we can talk to these dissident socialist groups in Venezuela.
One thing I will say about this is I think one of the most powerful things to do with the family members to bring them to a DSA meeting. And the reason why I say that is I think because then you meet the people who are saying this. Like when I tell people, like, I mean, I identify as a communist, but whatever, you know what I mean? Call yourself a socialist, call yourself a communist, right? And they know who you are, right? Like they know you, right? And then once they meet another person, they're like, oh, it's the same way I tell people to talk about like being trans, right? Like most people have never met a trans person, right? And like once they meet a trans person and talk to a trans person, like it's a lot harder to not see them as human, right? And I think like in a similar but different way, right? Like when we talk about an ideology like communism or socialism that has been, demonized for so many reasons, right? Some people justifiably like using it for harm, right? I think it's important to, bring it back to like who you are and what you know in your community, if that makes sense. But now I'll pass it off to Sue.
So obviously there is a very real problem of red baiting or red scare kind of stuff that we need to talk against. Like you said, I think the best remedy is to be open about your own politics. When people develop trust in that person,
A little slower.
And they begin to associate this person, you, with these politics, that's a way for them to formulate like good thoughts in that way. I appreciate what you said, Richard. Am I on the IC committee? I feel like I am actually, but I would also still tread lightly with seeking out dissident groups in Venezuela, because we know that the United States government also has kept a lot of Venezuelan money and also has done a lot of warfare on that country to sort of, it doesn't take away from its own actions, but it has crippled that economy through their force. So it's a very difficult line to tightrope. Like you want to support these groups, but you also want to be very careful the measure of that support. At the same time, I think the bare bones of it, when talking to people, is there's a lot of work that happens before the talk that needs to happen in these spaces. I think it makes it very easy for you to talk to your friends if there is a viable socialist option that is able to provide people things. You know what I mean? So I think it's hard for you to do that because Kamala Harris and Trump, I mean, she's better than Trump, but didn't really offer a lot of physical stuff that people could glob onto. So in the end, before we get to that conversation, we need to do the work to create that conversation easier for you, right? So in some ways, I don't have an answer. I think right now the best thing to do is to keep having that hope and building with that person, but of course the rest of it is to be in this space and build a movement so that when we start to build an actual party that can win power, you can now point to that group saying, well, there is a group that's going to give you stuff at least. What do you think of that? So I think that's important.
So I just had a question that kind of ties into what you were talking about with the border, and it kind of also ties into Cuba and Haiti. When like AOC and Bernie first gained national prominence, there was kind of this revivalism of like things like the Green New Deal, like harkening back to like the New Deal era. And I think part of that, when we talk about things with the border, there is this idea to, of course, humanize and provide amnesty for immigrants. There is this effort to try and put immigrants in all these different political categories. And what you said to that, I think, was very good. But there's also, I think, a lot of people talk about how there's the root cause that is causing this immigration, and I think that root cause is usually U.S. interference in Latin America. In Haiti, a lot of these immigrants are coming from Haiti or from Cuba or from Venezuela, Colombia, all this disruption that is, sometimes a result of political conflicts happening within those countries, but that are usually exacerbated by U.S. intervention. And so my question to you is, like, maybe as a part of our message, there could be a revival of something like the good neighbor policy. Or there is this idea that was actually started by AMLO in Mexico of a Marshall Plan for Latin America. Now that can be a little dicey because part of, I think, part of the Marshall Plan was funding for anti-socialist subversion in Europe, and part of Joe Biden's kind of stimulus package during his administration, part of his idea of we're going to fund the U.S. economy, domestic industry, was we have to combat China, and so there's a danger in that. But I think if we combine these two policies, the good neighbor policy and Marshall Plan for Latin America, and we have to be explicit that this is to improve the lives in America and improve the lives of people in Latin America without this constant aggression and competition with some foreign threat. I guess I'm just asking, what would you say to that as a part of the broader message regarding immigration?
Yeah, you can't separate the border and immigration from U.S. imperialism and U.S. foreign policy. I mean, the right, which I would include, the Democrats and Republicans as the right, they don't actually have a solution to people immigrating into the U.S. Not that it, in their eyes, they think it needs something, they think it needs to be solved, it needs to be stopped. But their policies cause it. Many people are coming from Venezuela because the U.S. intentionally destabilized it. Now, how the government reacted to it and their policies and stuff, that's one thing. But we know for sure, and as an American citizen, my government destabilizes that country. It imposes many sanctions on that country that makes it very difficult for the economy to be successful there. And I think that's one of the big demands we should have, that we have to end sanctions. like altogether. We have to stop sanctioning countries. It ices out entire people from participating in the global economy, and a lot of people suffer for it. So I think, yeah, we have to link the border and imperialism together in people's minds. That it's the rights policies of being very aggressive abroad, causing people to flee because the United States is destroying their countries. And yeah, they don't have any solutions. They are actually the ones causing it. And a lot of people, they deserve the right to stay in their homes and their communities and not be forced to leave through state violence or economic pressures. I just think they're very tied up. Foreign policy is often the root cause of people emigrating from their countries into the U.S. And I think that's a point that we have to hammer home, because no one's really doing that on the national stage.
Did you want to say anything on that?
Yeah. So first of all, related to what I said, we need to be bold. So when we are campaigning and we support candidates in the future, they need to explain this to the American people. They need to be willing to say the things that you said openly, saying that immigration is caused by our intervention. The people who are coming here are, in fact, many of them want to come here, but many of them are forced to come here, and there needs to be reparations for that too, pretty much, right? We took a lot from the rest of the world in terms of people and resource, and that needs to be a part of that, like you said, the good neighbor policy and a global New Deal in that sense. But I also want to reiterate, there is a way to tie the issues really well. So as much as we in America gain from how our country conducts itself internationally, we are also left in the worst place for it, right? Because U.S. power globally elevates the worst elements in every society, right? Israel is a good example of that, right? Israel is basically a client state. It wouldn't exist really at this point without U.S. support. But also here, right? Look at our elite. Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, he's just hopping around like a weirdo. So America made that. America is that in many ways, globally and here. So we also need to frame it as such that, hey, in the world, humanity will succeed if U.S. power is overthrown, right? And I think if you explain that to people, they can maybe get around the idea that they need to show solidarity with the folks most affected by U.S. power abroad. But maybe they can also get behind the theory that they'll also lead a much more humane life if U.S. power, capitalist power is taken. Because if you look in New Jersey, I think we had the conversation earlier, like rising rents and stuff, it's not great, right? If you live, in areas where I'm living next to or around, people are struggling, right? That is because of who has been allowed to control our global economy. And that is not just the U.S. capitalists, the business owners, it's the friends they've built around the world. So their side has this coalition, and their side benefits each other. We have our side, but we just need to stitch that together and make it apparent to an individual who may not understand that well, or someone who does, but doesn't see the bigger picture yet. So I do think there is a way of arguing for that. And frankly, it's necessary. Because if we don't do it, the world's going to be underwater, Asia, Africa, and then simultaneously the temperatures will go up. There's a whole set of consequences if we don't start this process. And that also begins with our movements. And if we're interested in candidates, it also starts with us having red lines for them. You need to talk about these issues. There's no more waiting. We've tried to wait. The Democrats always tell us, hey, we need to water this down a bit. They've watered it to the point where they're advocating for a wall. So we can't do that anymore. Not just our lifetimes. I'm a grumpy millennial for a reason, because I've lived through Obama. I mean, I was happy, I guess, then. But then freaking Biden, Trump again. Like, what the, you know, like, this is crazy. I don't want to live this life. You know what I mean? But this is for our families. This is for our friends younger than us. This is for our kids, if we have any. Like, this is for the future. So we need to start building that by being bold in whoever we choose to support. I'm not a big electoral person, but if we have candidates, that's what they need to do, is to communicate that idea to the people. Because you'd be surprised, a lot of people are waiting to be on our side. They just don't know it yet, right? And that's what's been missing from this conversation.
Before we end, I'd like to have Jake Efros come up real quick.
Real quick, I'll just give an introduction. My name is Jake Efros. I'm a teacher in Jersey City. I'm a tenant, I'm a union organizer. I'm a really, really, really proud member of DSA as well. And I'm really grateful and honored to be endorsed by the North New Jersey DSA to be a candidate for City Council in Jersey City. I live in Jersey City Heights, Ward D, and in the Heights, we have a huge immigrant population. Jersey City, Hudson County, it's about 40% of the population is born outside of the US. So something like Votes for All is going to be revolutionary in expanding democracy in my district, in my neighborhood, and throughout Jersey City. And I know that we win it in New Brunswick, we win it in Jersey City, we're going to be able to win it in places like Elizabeth and beyond, and revolutionize the electorate and who's able to participate in more and more parts of our political process in the state of New Jersey and beyond. So who's ready to organize for Votes for All? So again, I'm running as a DSA candidate because I know that we need independent political power like what DSA is building if we're going to win housing as a human right, if we're going to win vastly resourced public schools for our public school students, if we're going to win mass transit for all, if we're going to win pro-immigrant and pro-worker policies for everyone. Because as folks have been saying here during this wonderful conversation, the Democratic Party is not going to give it to us. The Democratic Party has failed us over and over and over again, and we deserve more, and we deserve better.
Yeah, we do.
So I'm really, again, grateful to be able to be a DSA candidate, to run as a Democratic Socialist openly in this Jersey City election next year, and to be able to organize with campaigns and groups like Votes for All, to stand alongside groups like Cosecha. So really, really grateful. What I'll plug right now is that, as we said before, none of this is possible without people power donations. So if you can make a donation, I have to ask for this stuff all the time now that I'm running as a candidate. If you can make a donation to DSA, to Votes for All, to Cosecha, there is the QR code on your table, so please chip in some money. We also have some really exciting events coming up. So if what you heard today moved you and resonated with you, we got to put our feet and our bodies and our time into the fight too. So sign up, that's the other QR code right next to the donation one. Sign up for an event, notably in Jersey City. Next Saturday, we're going to have a big canvas meeting at Journal Square in the afternoon, yeah?
Yeah.
In the afternoon. There's going to be snacks, there's going to be childcare provided, so shout out to folks who are providing childcare today.
They can't hear us, they're in the room.
They're in the other room.
They're busy doing an amazing job, so thank you to them.
And so that's this coming, or next Saturday, a week from today, the 23rd in Jersey City. And then the day after, Sunday, is going to be the next Votes for All meeting. But just most immediately, if you're curious about DSA, if you're interested in becoming a member, if you might be a new member, we have a meeting tomorrow, or the North New Jersey chapter, that's just North Jersey, okay. North Jersey chapter has a meeting tomorrow. Come talk to the wonderful organizers here if you want to learn more about it. But again, solidarity to everyone, and really grateful for this conference today. Thanks so much.